This is an expose from a former Bungie community manager giving us some details as to what really goes on behind closed doors at Bungie HQ, especially in regards to Pete Parsons, the CEO of Bungie. But before we dive into reading all of these details, because this has become top trending over the last week, I wanted to give a little bit of context, which is just that Bungie has just laid off obviously a good amount of employees. And no one's going to be happy about that, of course, and obviously that is a big issue of mismanagement to have to lay off even more employees this time than the previous time, which obviously upset a ton of people, but it does happen, and some might perceive some of these negative stories as maybe retaliation of some kind, but there's nothing to cross-reference it towards because Pete Parsons himself, he's not tweeting out anything, he's not sharing any stories or replying to any of this stuff, and he currently has not stepped down as the CEO of Bungie, even though many people have called for it. But I just wanted to give that brief bit of context. Now let's jump into and read what we got here from a former community manager at Bungie. We got, I remember the Friday before the first layoffs, me and another community manager were in the lobby, and I was literally talking about how I didn't have enough money for groceries and that employee services was an angel for helping me have food since I was told to drop all of my side jobs when Chew got laid off. Chew is their partner, and so when they got laid off of their job, they're being, encouraged to just focus more on their work at Bungie, because obviously getting paid from Bungie to be a community manager is a pretty lucrative job. Then we got Pete walked right up to us and bragged about a few new expensive cars he bought and that we should come to his house and see them, which, to be fair, I mean, that's kind of a bad time to be bragging about your expensive cars if people are talking about how they literally can't buy groceries. But, maybe he didn't hear that. I mean, we don't know the context of this. It would be very interesting to see how Pete would respond to something like this. It sounds awful though, right? It sounds like this person's like, I can barely pay for my groceries. And then Pete's like, hey, come take a ride in my new $200,000 car or something. Just absolutely awful if that is the exact accurate context. Next up, we have, after hearing how we weren't making enough money, we did not make Dylan's money. Dylan was senior, and we were not allowed to go for any senior roles without our department. He also made shit money when he first started. The pay was atrocious if you were in soft skills. So what they're referencing there is Dylan is DMG. He's one of the senior community managers, and he's going to make significantly more than the community managers that are beneath him, which would be where they were at. And obviously above them, you have even the lead community manager, which is Cosmo. And so they're going to make even more money. Obviously, it's going to be hierarchy of pay based on your seniority and your position within the community management team. And it's probably perceived and probably pretty well known that the soft skills or the community management pay roles are not going to be quite as lucrative as perhaps like game development roles and stuff of that nature, I imagine. Just because I don't think you have to have as many qualifications. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think you have to have quite as many qualifications. So I think it's a higher paying role to be a dev. Next up, we have, I remember looking at them and being like, was that weird? Why couldn't they look us in the eye? And just having a bad feeling. I was told I was being too paranoid, but it didn't sit right. Due Monday morning, getting an HR invite at 6 a.m., even though I said specifically I would never talk to HR without a manager present due to horrible interactions with the head of HR there. She's gone, thankfully. When I couldn't get a response on what the meeting was, I knew. So apparently no one's looking them in the eye. There's obviously, a mood or there's a feeling in the air that, someone's going to be getting laid off. And then they're sent that invitation. And then they knew that they got laid off. Then I started digging, and I have not stopped digging since October. There's so much more to this that won't come out for a few more years to protect people. But I just want to say this falls squarely on leadership. So what they're referencing is, I guess, some hidden information as to exactly what's going on here, and it won't come out for a few more years, which means that it's going to take time for this to go. They might actually have like an NDA signed where they can't talk about anything that happened, maybe in perpetuity, or maybe there's a certain time limit to where they can actually talk about stuff. So obviously, when you work at Bungie, when you work at any company that has, classified information, you don't want people to be spilling the beans on some of that stuff. So I guess that's what they're referencing, is that there's some hidden information out there that would be very damaging to the company as it is currently. And it should be mentioned that right now, obviously 220 employees were laid off from Bungie, which does suck, but there are currently 850 employees at Bungie right now, and they all have families and they don't want to be laid off, and they don't want to be, they don't want the game to completely collapse and then have to go find work elsewhere. I don't think anyone really wants that. That would be awful for everyone, right? That would be a much worse situation than we're in currently. So I think that the pursuit of the downfall of Bungie or trying to destroy Bungie is, I I don't think that's a very good pursuit. I mean, if you're not enjoying the game, don't play the game. If you're frustrated with leadership at Bungie, express that in a, you know, in a fair manner. But you know, trying to push for the whole company to go under, I don't know. My perspective is like, there's 850 employees. Do you want them to all get laid off and have to go work for Sony or something else, right? That sounds awful. There were amazing members of leadership, Joe and Katarina among them. So you have Joe Blackburn and then Katarina Macedo. They were in the part of the leadership team, and so she's saying that there's some good apples and there's some bad apples in leadership. But the problem at the top has been a problem since the 90s. So it's people who basically are saying people who've been around for a long time. Some of these are veterans that have been working for Bungie. How Q&A has been treated, how the devs have been treated. If you dared to ask questions about, hey, this doesn't seem right, you were instantly labeled anti-Bungie. Interesting. Some members of the leadership team didn't want a studio. They wanted a cult worship to worship their legacy. Wow. Now that is a pretty bold statement. Now, obviously, Bungie has had an impressive legacy with Halo and then the success of Destiny, so I could see how that could be perceived, but a very, very big claim right there, right? And then we have, so we're going to take your legacy. So we're going to take your legacy because it is owed, especially the people you threw away that have spent their entire careers, some close to 20 years with you, for you, in spite of themselves. So there you have it. That's the entirety of the post from a former community manager. Let me know your thoughts about that one. Quite the spicy post. And make sure you're subscribed here if you want to stay up to date on all the news in Destiny 2. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.